Using music to sell things isn't a new thing. It went through a period there in the, I guess, 70s, or I guess late 60s through the mid 80s, where it was kind of anathema, and you had Neil Young, singing this note's for you, and artists seemed to want to distance themselves from feeling like their music was being used to shill stuff. Over the last 5-6 years, that's changed completely, and any of the taboo around that has gone away. Now you're kind of seen as foolish if you don't use your music any opportunity you can get. I have very mixed emotions about this. I think that it's too early to tell what the long-term ramifications of doing that are. I can talk about two specific instances that are kind of on two sides of the coin. There's an artist called Nick Drake who's dead. He died in the 70s. And his catalog would sell about 3,000 copies a year. He was widely respected critically, but no one could figure out a way to market him to the masses. Volkswagen put his music in a car ad, and he went from selling 3,000 copies a year to 300,000, and ended up selling well over 1 million records. I personally can't think of anything bad about that. Exposing 1 million people to Nick Drake's unique kind of music can only, in my mind, affect change in a good way. The fact that it helped Volkswagen sell cars, okay, that's okay. On the other hand, someone like Led Zeppelin using rock and roll to sell Cadillacs seems to me to mess a little bit with our cultural heritage. So I think you have to be careful about it. I've heard a lot of negative things about that Led Zeppelin commercial, and artists need to understand for the long term this stuff does affect you. And if you shoot out there and you are tied completely to some product, you have to understand what message that sends to your artist community. But if you think about some of the artists that don't do it, and you'd be surprised at those that don't, it's artists like Eminem. Eminem won't let his music be used in commercials, and the only movie he's let it be used in is his own, 8 Mile. You think of Eminem as someone that would, and yet he doesn't. He's made a conscious choice not to do that. And there are other artists that do it, and there are other artists that seem to do it well with some nuance. Most recently U2 with the iPod. There's an interesting article, I can't recall where I read it, but Bruce Springsteen seeing U2 do the iPod commercial, and him calling his manager and saying, how much did they get for this? We got to do this, because Springsteen's someone that doesn't let his music ever be licensed, and he says he frequently will flip through magazines or watch TV and think about the millions of dollars he could have made doing this. And he saw this U2 thing, and he calls his manager, and his manager said, before you say anything, they didn't take a dime for it. So U2, who also does not let their music, they will license it for films occasionally, but it's always films like, Wim Wenders. I mean, they're very careful about who they license it to. And up until the iPod ads, they hadn't licensed it to anyone. They chose to license it to iPod because they felt that it wasn't out of alignment with who they are as a band. They felt that technologically this was something they wanted to be associated with. And they covered their bases by saying, we don't want a dime for it. Certainly they gained in exposure for Vertigo, more millions of dollars than they ever could have taken from it. But they didn't pocket any money directly from it. And so they made choices. They kind of hedged their bets a little bit. As new artists coming up, you're going to be faced with this sooner than you think. A lot of tours are sponsored by products. The Vans Warped Tour is sponsored by a shoe company. As cool as that shoe company may be, they've done a masterful job of having a sponsored tour that appeals to people that typically would not like sponsorship. If you think about the typical person who goes to a Vans Warped concert, it's kind of a punk rocker. Punk rockers tend not to like corporate sponsorship, and yet they've managed to kind of massage this in a way that the people just think it's kind of part of the name. I see things like certain beer companies that sponsor artists, and they put them in their commercials and they make them say certain things. I don't think that ever works out well. I've never ever heard of a band that's done one of those things that has had any long-term success. I've heard a lot of bands that were on the brink of some success and do those and have failed after that. So it's choices you make, and you have to have a set of values and a kind of mission statement, to use a business word, that enables you to make these choices very easily. If your mission mandates that you only make informed choices when it comes to product endorsement and things like that, then you know how to answer these things. If you don't have a mission statement at all and it's you're just kind of dealing with whatever comes across your plate, you're going to have a hard time making these decisions. And that mission statement has to align with your values as a band. You need to think of this band in some ways as a meritorious business. Companies have figured out that they need to connect. They need to use music to help them connect with their customer. So rather than it being some very secondary thought where, oh, we'll just hire a jingle writer, we'll do whatever, they've seen that, you know, we can make a very clear emotional statement with who we align ourselves with music. The problem is that many of the people that are running these companies haven't the foggiest idea who that person is, who the musician is that they should be aligning themselves with. This creates a wonderful space for people that are passionate about music to find jobs in businesses that 2-3 years ago weren't there. You know, you mentioned companies like Fendi and Toyota. These places now have music departments, you know, where people are hired to come in and you know, determine what the right music is, to go make the deals. So you have music supervisors now that are working for products that before would at most hire out for. The best way to connect with that, if you're an artist who wants to be in that camp, in my opinion, is to make great music that has an emotional connection with an audience, because these companies study very, very clearly the demographics and the psychographics of their customer. They will learn what they're listening to. And especially now that they're hiring people who are much closer to it, they can look at a demographic and look at their buying patterns and go, okay, that type of person is likely to listen to this type of music. The demographic these people most covet are 18 to 24-year-olds, right? Those are the big largely, those are the big buying power people. That also happens to be a big percentage of music audiences, people that actually go to clubs still. So if you're doing something that's slightly kind of innovative, cutting edge, that is actually drawing crowds with it, they'll find you. It's hard to manipulate those situations. It's hard to kind of get in the face of one of those companies and say, choose me, choose me. The best thing you can do is to create good music that resonates, that feels timely. You know, bands like the Walkmen, bands that are still not selling a ton of records, they are just making a fortune off of all of their product, you know, the use of their music and commercials, and they're doing it in a smart way that's not alienating their fan base, and that's the challenge. They're kind of just going ahead and making their music. These companies come in and say, hey, we want to pay you $100,000 to use this song here, there, everywhere. Fine. Sometimes you don't even know it's the Walkman. And that allows them to keep building their fan base without the risk of someone saying, hey, you know, I don't like Fendi, so now I don't like this band anymore.